I'm Stefania and I am uncanny.
So this that was so cool because we are, like a little over a month removed from sophomore year of Uncanny Experience, and this got to be your first dig into that whole event. Looking back on it now, as you got a little bit of distance from it, what are your thoughts on it?
I absolutely loved the event. I actually was on Chris and Chandler's podcast talking about it about like a month ago. And I was just raving about the experience because it is an experience. You're in this immersive world of X-Men, and everybody there, is a huge fan. Otherwise, why would they be there, right? So you meet so many people that have such a strong connection to X-Men, and then you meet so many new friends out of that. Like I don't know who said this, maybe it was like Chandler or Dylan, but um there were people that went last year that made friends there and now room together there this year, which is like crazy how that works and how you can connect in that way. But as soon as you walk to the building, really, it looks like the X Mansion, right? It looks like what the X Mansion would look like in our world, instead of like the cartoon world, which is really cool to see. And you walk in, and the Minneapolis Club is beautiful. I love that there's not a lot of floors, so you can do everything in even one day. So if you can't go both, or the tickets for both days, right?
Hmm.
You're right. All right, so you can go both days anyway, and just repeat, rinse and repeat. But I loved the fact that there were characters there, X-Men characters there, like cosplay guests that walked around and were in character. Um, that just feeds into more of the immersive experience. I loved the fact that comic guests were professors and had their panels. The graduation, like it's all things that they thought of that would be in a school setting. And now I'm excited to see what summer school would be like. So, summer school, like the Summers family, I'm hoping they do something with that. That'd be really cool. Also, the Hellfire Club, the nighttime one, Hellfire Club, that was really awesome. I thought they did a very fantastic job on that, and the theatrics of it was really cool. And the house pep rallies as well were, I mean, I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm sure all of them were just as fun as the one that I was in. I was in House Hellfire. But they are such a great way to get that like school spirit going. Like when I was in school, I kind of, not that I didn't have school spirit, but we had pep rallies. Obviously, went to those pep rallies. We had to. It was the end of the day of classes. Um, but I mean, I went to football games, but I really didn't have that much like school spirit. But because this is X-Men, it's like different for me. Of course, I'm gonna have so much school spirit. So like this was a perfect setting for me. So the pep rallies were lots of fun. And also, I already told uh Chris and Chandler this on their podcast, but their graduation was the best graduation I've ever had. So
Oh yes.
yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
you listened to that podcast episode, but yeah, that was the best graduation I have ever had.
Hmm. Yeah, because your other one got jinxed due to COVID, right? Is that the story I remember you telling?
Yeah, that was the college graduation. I mean, I didn't graduate in 2020. I was lucky enough to not have that and graduate in 2021, but it was still during COVID. So I really wasn't graduating. When COVID happened, first like few weeks that ever, it was like, oh, no school. But then when they said we were staying home for like the rest of the year, that really took a toll on me because I couldn't see my friends. I was submerged in the virtual world basically, and I hated it after a while. Um, but there were a lot of things I did realize coming out of COVID. And I believe if that didn't happen, then I probably wouldn't be where I am today. Um, but in 2021, that's when I graduated, we had an in-person graduation. It was immediate family only. So only my parents were able to come, and then my brother, one of my brothers, my older brother couldn't make it, I don't think. I don't know. But it was a while ago. I can't remember. Um, oh yeah, he didn't make it. But I didn't really feel like I was graduating with friends. Like I had friends that were older than me or younger than me, like a year older or a year younger, and I wasn't graduating with them. I had like film friends that I graduated with, and there was like some that were sitting in the row in front of me off to like the side. Um, but I honestly just felt like I didn't really have a strong connection with anyone that I was graduating with. And then going to get my diploma, they mail that shit to you. Um, I I just felt like I didn't really accomplish anything. I don't know, because your last 2 years, my junior, half a junior year and all of senior year was during COVID, and I felt like I didn't really accomplish anything. Um, so I felt like this graduation didn't mean anything to me. And then we had to wear a mask the whole time. So I walked off the stage. I think I had my mask off on stage because they took a photo because I didn't want that to be in the photo. But then they took a photo of you when you get off the stage in front of the school like band or whatever. And I had my mask on for that because you had to put it back on immediately because they tell you. And that's something that I hate. I don't even know where that picture is now. So, um, but that was college graduation. High school graduation, it was 2017, no pandemic, but we usually have our graduation out on the football field, and because there's more space. And we were keeping an eye on the weather that day. And it didn't say it was going to rain. It was cloudy outside, but it didn't say it was going to rain. So up until like 5 minutes before we had to walk out, we thought we were going to go outside to graduate to the football field. And it was nice outside, like warm. And like 5 minutes before we had to walk out, one of the teachers that was basically in charge of the whole graduation, students and all, um, said that they're moving it inside. So they moved it inside to the bigger gym that we have. We have two gyms. This was like the newer, bigger one. Um, and it was immediate family only. Rest of the family were to sit in the auditorium and watch a stream on the screen projector. Um, and it was absolute chaos because there were people trying to, because I don't think it the word got to everyone that the graduation was going to be inside, and there were probably people already out on the football field that had to walk up this hill to the school. And it was chaos because everyone had like a ticket, like immediate family had their ticket, whatever. And they were letting in like people that weren't immediate family, like friends and whatnot. And they weren't even checking tickets. It got to a point where my mom was actually freaking out, and it was my mom, my aunt were there, um, and like some other people. And my mom started like freaking out and like crying basically because she was like, I'm not gonna see my daughter graduate, whatever. And so my aunt has balls, right? She goes up to the principal and like yells in his face, saying, like, you gotta get this situated. Her daughter's in there. She's not gonna see her graduate. We can't get in, blah, blah, blah. And then the funniest thing I've heard, the principal goes, okay, you can let her in. I don't do well with crying women.
Agreed.
And that was just so funny. But like the whole time that was going on, everybody, all the students were in such like a pissed off mood because it was hot in the gym. Well, I don't think we were in the gym yet. We were going to walk in, but it was just way too many people for this gym. And you walk in and I'm not excited to graduate because I was hoping to be outside with a bunch of family there to see. And yeah, it just, we went inside, we sat down, and it was hot. it was just hot in there. I could feel myself sweating underneath my gown. Afterwards, I like took off my gown and you could see the sweat marks on my dress. That's how like hot it was in there. Um, I felt like I was melting and the speeches that were going on, nobody wanted to be there. Everyone was kind of just in like this pissed off mood because of all the chaos that was going on. Um, and I was part of the choir then, and we at the beginning we like went up to sing the national anthem, and you my my choir director was like, let's make this fast because nobody wants to be here. And we're like, okay. So we did that and then we sat back down and it just I couldn't wait till that was over. Afterwards, when I was like seeing my friends and like and all, it was another moment where I was like, I I'm glad this is over because that was hell, but I really wish we got to like do this again. Um, it's just like 5 minutes before we walk out, they give us that news where we're inside, and now there's all this like last minute things going on. And then funny enough, um, my godfather goes, uh, we expect a redo in 4 years. I'm like, you got it. You know how that turned out.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
That was a long story. I apologize, but like that there was a lot of things that happened and it was I I was even contemplating after I graduated college. I was like, should I just go to uh uh get my master's just so I can get like a better graduation? Then I was like, I that's insane. I'm not gonna do that. So
Yeah. Instead,
now
all you had to
I mean what
said instead all you had to do was fly to Minneapolis, and you
yeah,
got a
I was
better
literally
one.
gonna say the same thing. Like, yeah, I got a better graduation years later. So
Hmm.
all I had to do was wait a bit longer. And yeah, I got to graduate from Xavier School. Best
Yeah.
graduation I've ever had. Because I
So
actually
what?
felt like I was graduating with like a family, with like friends that I've known for years. And I also got my diploma from Chris Claremont. Like, how many people can say that, right?
Right. Yeah, and that was I think that's one of the things that I learned first year and was of course reinforced second year is just how I think fantastic the X-Men community is because yeah, people ask me who haven't been to Uncanny, they're like, "What's it like?" And I'm like, "It is not a con.
Yeah.
It is not a con. It's a family reunion for a lot of people you didn't know you were related to. Like
Hmm.
that's the best way you could put it. Like you said about people who like met the first year. Yeah, absolute same. I mean, that's the way Jennifer and I were. We met like we didn't even know who each other were. We met last year at Uncanny. The next year, I'm picking her up at the airport. Like, hey, let's
Yeah.
go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I feel like in the graduation ceremony, that was a really touching moment when like Chris Claremont was going to hand them out, and then he like sort of like handed the mantle over to Gail Simone, for her to like do the honors. I thought that was such a neat like passing of the torch moment.
Hmm. I didn't see much of it because I came in a bit later. Well, not a bit later, it was like a few minutes. Um, but I also was like in the back of the room, closer to the back, so I kind of like couldn't see and like hear much. But I was able to just enjoy my time there and just be in the presence of everyone.
Hmm. Well, that's cool. I'm glad you had a lot of fun. Yeah, summer school is going to be interesting.
Yeah. I've
Not
never been
not.
to summer school. This is my first time. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, I have been, but usually not for good reasons. So this hopefully this is a good reason to go to summer school. Well, that's really awesome. The what the funny thing is we have done so many like live streams and stuff together talking about like X-Men 97 and stuff like that, but I don't know if we ever really got into you and me the background of like how you got into the X-Men to begin with.
Yeah, that's a story. So but I always start my this story off in this way. I had like a mental breakdown before I graduated college. So that's I mean that's a story of how I got into like the content creating stuff, but it kind of feeds in. But where I first got into X-Men was actually over COVID. It's very blurry for me how exactly I started, but I do remember the fact, or like when I started too, but I do remember, I think I was just like researching Marvel heroes, like strong women superheroes in Marvel. And because I was already like familiar with the MCU, I was already like a fan of the MCU. And while I knew like the X-Men existed, like I knew there was the X-Men movies, but I never really like got into it that much. I grew up with Spider-Man, I grew up with Fantastic Four, which it's surprising how I like didn't really watch X-Men till later on, watching Fantastic Four and stuff. But I I found Rogue. Oh wait, hold on. Actually, we need to backtrack a bit more because I, ever since I was a kid, I used to always like make up these stories in my head, and I was very like imaginative, and I would create characters and stuff. So I don't remember when I did this, but I created this character that was a superhero and could absorb the powers from other heroes, but keep them permanently. And I never gave her a name because I'm terrible with names. And she just lived in my head. So, like for an example, she would absorb Thor and have the power of Thor, and I thought it was really cool. And so when I was researching these characters and like women superhero characters, Rogue was on some of these lists, and I just read who she was, and uh, I was like, this sounds like the character that I created. So I guess I gave her a name, and that's how Rogue was born, in my head at least. And then from then on, she was the segue into watching X-Men the animated series, and then Evolution and reading the comics. The first comic I ever bought was Avengers Annual 10. I was dressed as Rogue at my first Comic Con, and one of the vendors was like Rogue, and I turned around and they called me over and actually gave me a pretty good deal on the comic, which was nice. And it's a newsstand too.
Ooh.
And it's signed by Michael Golden, Chris Claremont, Al Milgrom, and Jim Shooter. So four big names on that
Wow.
comic. Yeah. I would love to get it graded. Obviously not CGC because it's, wasn't witnessed, but I would love to get it graded with like CBCS or something, just to keep it preserved and stuff. But so leading into how I got into like cosplay and whatever. So I did a lot of research on Rogue and the X-Men, and just kept on reading the comics. I was following this I have Marvel Unlimited. I was following this Rogue reading list that they had on there because they have them for like each character. And I just fell in love with her. And that transitioned over to cosplaying. So I first time I dressed up as her was actually Halloween of 2020. I actually wore it to work. But I had the wrong wig because I couldn't get the other wig in time. So I actually had the Evolution wig. Um,
Oh.
yeah. And I look back on that photo and I'm like, wow, I look completely different. Like for reference, I lost like almost 60 pounds. Yeah. So I look completely different since then. Um, and then in 2021 is when, right before graduation, it was a few months, I think like in April of 2021, I had this like mental breakdown. Oh, you know what? It was early. I remember it was early. It was like February because I was going to like physical therapy. And yeah. And I had this breakdown and wasn't sure what to do with my life. And then I kind of got this like epiphany. I won't go into the details, but I write this all down in my journal. My journal knows everything, but I don't like to verbally say all of it. And I basically started making content and seeing where it went. I enjoyed it. And yeah, the rest is history.
Mhm.
And now I'm here on the Finch X podcast.
I love it. Because I feel like there it's rare that I talk to two X-Men fans and they have a similar story.
Oh, really?
on how they got to where they are. You know, there's
Mental
so
breakdowns? Yeah, it
yeah,
happens quite
mental
a bit.
breakdowns. You know, there are some people who got into it from the movies. There are some people who got into it from the original animated series. There are
Hmm.
some people that are X-Men fans that I've met who paid zero attention to the X-Men whatsoever and saw the very first episode of X-Men 97 and are like really, really, really new to the crowd. And like, by all means, welcome. Like, you know, let's go.
Yeah.
So those are always fascinating stories to hear.
Yeah. Um, I'm just glad I got into it with the animated series because that's what majority of X-Men fans grew up with. And I just binge watched it through COVID. I it didn't take me long to finish it. And then I found the other shows, I found Evolution, I found Wolverine and the X-Men, and I just binged through those. And then I watched all of the X-Men Fox movies too. The timeline is weird for me. Like I can't remember if it was during COVID or like right before. It's so weird how time works in my head because COVID's just a blur and
Mhm.
everything's all over the place since then. So I'm gonna stick with like it being COVID. Like it's not that I didn't know the X-Men existed. I did. I just never like got into it. Like Wolverine, everyone knew who Wolverine was. But Spider-Man was actually my first introduction to Marvel because I grew up watching Tobey's Spider-Man.
Yeah, I have to admit that it's like whenever I hear someone say, I got into the animated series and I binged it, there's like a small palpable piece of pain in my chest because I am old enough that it was like I was waiting weekly for the new episodes to come
Yeah,
out, and you would have to like set a VCR up to like time it to like record it, even though you were up Saturday morning anyway. And then they
yeah,
got into this thing where they were doing them like Saturday nights, like prime time, like 6 p.m. And I'd
yeah.
literally like remember like being out riding my bike with friends and my watch would beep at me that it was 5:30 and I knew that it was time I had to like get on my bike and get home so I could
Hmm.
catch the new episode of X-Men,
Yeah,
especially when they were doing like the Dark Phoenix saga and stuff. And
yeah,
so yeah, fortunate for all y'all who like got introduced to it and could just sit there for like days on end and just like blitz through it. For the rest of us, yeah, it took 5 years.
yeah. I can't remember what shows I recorded growing up because we had to do, I mean, growing up we did the same thing. We had the VCR, we had to record on the tape. I don't remember what shows I was recording though. I watched a whole bunch. I watched Barney, Dora, um SpongeBob. There was like we also had like my brother would record stuff as well. Oh, he had his Pokemon stuff, he had his Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah. It was
Hmm.
like a whole house full of just like recording cartoons because we're not up at this time. We don't get to stay up this late. But yeah, I remember it. Good times.
Yeah,
Good times.
it really was. I had like oh god, a VHS tape with like the Scotch tape on the back of it that said like season 3 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Hmm.
And my like son who's 8 years old was looking at it, like pulling it out of the sleeve, like, what the hell is this? This big blocky tape
Yeah.
with stuff and spools inside of him. Like, man, I don't even. By the way, if you ever want to freak out, get on Amazon and look how much VCRs cost right now. They're outrageous. It is because like
What?
nobody manufactures them. I've got a whole box of VHS tapes, and I thought like I'm like, oh man, it'd be kind of cool to get a VCR and like watch some of these old ones. Yeah, no, look how much they're going for right now.
$350?
Yes,
Oh
yes.
my God, 240? Oh my God.
Yeah, I thought for sure I could get one at like Walmart for like $30 or something.
Oh,
Yeah,
just go to like thrift stores.
yeah,
I'm sure they'll have it. We still have our VCRs. We don't throw anything out in my house. It's just I have actually a block TV just sitting on the floor somewhere in this room, and it has like a VCR player attached to it.
Oh,
That's how I was
those.
able to. I have um the animated series on VHS tapes, not all of them, but a good amount. And I was playing one of them when I first got it. And I was like, this is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tiny
Yes.
screen, but this is so cool. I would love
Ah,
to have like a little maybe tent set up it like a with the TV and just like I don't know, be a kid and just in this tent watching X-Men,
that's
eating
what
my
we.
bowl of cereal.
Yeah, we need to like talk to Chandler and Dylan and Chris and see if we can
Hmm.
like that can be an event at Uncanny. Like, can there be a big slumber
Yeah.
party room where there's like popcorn
Yeah.
and cookies and it's all dark and there's like pillow forts and just a big TV that's playing like X-Men the animated series?
Yeah,
Oh,
for
make a
sure.
a cereal bar, right?
Magnetos.
Yes.
I'm
That
so down for that.
that would be great. Oh man, we got to get on that. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Um, hopefully
We'll
we'll
see
have.
how well that goes because the Freddie Mercury Gail Simone thing wasn't didn't go well.
You know what? I was just about to bring that up. For those of you who want to know, like Stefani and I had decided that prior to Uncanny, we were going to attempt to convince Gail Simone, who's the current writer of Uncanny X-Men, to somehow make it Marvel canon that Freddie Mercury was a mutant because we're both big Queen fans too. I will admit though, when we walked up to her and presented it to her, she gave a genuine laugh. And it wasn't
She
like
did.
laughing at us like you're idiots. Like it was like that's actually a good idea. But she's like, yeah, Marvel can't get the rights to anything. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the laugh alone like told me like, okay, it was a good bit.
Yeah. Well, for future reference, if we ever see Freddie Mercury in a comic and he's a mutant, we will know that that was us.
Yeah, it had to be. Even if it's not credited, even if it
Hmm.
comes 5 years later, we'll know that we planted the seed and that's where it came from.
Yeah, and now it is on the podcast as well. So,
Yes, yes, recorded for posterity.
yes.
Um, so speaking of which, how much are you into the new books?
So I didn't really get a chance to read the other books besides Uncanny. I've just been like in a slump.
Mm,
Ever since coming back from three cons in a row. I'm
yeah.
just like I'm exhausted. And then also catching up with work too. So I actually just read Uncanny 5 today. Um, and I was fully into it. I was like, what's happening? What's going on? What's going on with my girl? Um, and I picked up Psylocke #1. Didn't get a chance to read that yet. So I'm excited for this run of X-Men books. So I heard X-Men is actually pretty good. So I'll have to pick that up and read. I didn't get all the issues from X-Men. I got like the first two or three, and then I kind of stopped. But I have unlimited, so I'm gonna try and read them on there. Um, but I'm loving it. I'm loving what Gail is doing with Uncanny. I'm loving the artwork for it, and I'm excited to see where it's headed.
Yeah, me too. I'm the from the Ashes era. I want to say, in my opinion, as someone who's read all of the books that have come out since From the Ashes, it's mostly good. There's a couple titles that I'm kind of like, like I don't hate it, but I could take it or leave it. But um, X-Men, especially Uncanny X-Men and NYX, are all really really good.
Hmm.
I don't know if you caught this. Maybe you caught this through TikTok or wherever. The interesting thing is they revealed in the X-Men book recently that there is a degenerative mutation disease that has infected mutants that is a result of the regeneration pods from Krakoa. That's why
Yeah.
Magneto doesn't have his powers and he's in like basically a floating wheelchair.
Hmm.
And it's so dependent upon the amount of times you were resurrected, it has an impact on the mutant's powers,
Mm.
which relates over to Uncanny because when Wolverine got jacked up, I'm like, why is he not healing from this?
Yeah.
Like what? Like okay, they had to bring him all the way back to Louisiana. It's
Yeah.
been 15 minutes. He should be fine, and he's
Yeah.
still like blinded and like limping. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's what's going on.
Yeah. I actually didn't know about that, but that's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense now
Mm.
with what's going on. Yeah, because I picked up I was when I was reading issue 5 today, Wolverine was still like bandaged up, and I was like, he's not healing. Like, why is he not healing? So that
Mm.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I kind of wondered, and it is as somebody who's a lifelong Wolverine fan, if nobody can tell by the wall behind me or the hat that I'm wearing, um, it was always interesting because like I remember the very first comic book I ever read was an X-Men comic, 1989, and then that like Wolverine is like he gets hit by like a couple and their like pickup truck like running across a country road. And back then, he could get jacked up and basically he'd be in a hospital bed for a few days, but he wouldn't die,
Hmm.
And slowly over the course of time, that evolved to the point of like he could be caught in the middle of a nuclear blast and 15 minutes later be fine,
Yeah.
He just and so I part of me wondered like is Gale kind of doing a little bit of a maybe slightly nerfing the healing factor for purposes of story, but then after that got revealed in the other book, it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
Hmm. Because I don't know how many mutants actually um got like regenerated.
Hmm.
I don't know what the count is on that. Because I'm sure it's a lot. And that would be pretty bad for mutants.
Yeah, well, and especially since you saw it, I believe the most in like the core X-Men because they were the ones who were going out on missions.
Yeah.
Like obviously characters like Beak or those weren't getting
Hmm.
resurrected that often, but Wolverine, like any mission, you're taking Wolverine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all there is to it because he's just the guy. He's where the
Well,
BD energy
Cyclops
comes from.
too.
Yeah, exactly.
Cyclops is like a huge one.
Hmm. So how that
Mhm.
plays out going forward, especially because I think yeah, this winter we've got the Raid on Grey Malkin crossover coming up between the
Yeah.
two X books.
Yeah. I'm excited for that.
Hmm. Me too. Yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with Xavier, like how he's
Yeah.
become like the pariah, like the mutant enemy number one in all of the
Yeah.
X-Men books.
I know. It's really interesting. I think they're the storytelling of like the X books is kind of like you know how it's sometimes just all over the place and you can't keep up. I feel like they've kind of found this pattern where it's all connecting much better than it used to. I don't know if that's just me, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah, there was. It feels like as somebody, and I like I've been a fan of the comics since the '80s. That doesn't mean that like since the '80s I've read every single issue. I had periods like sometimes were years where I kind of like got out of it and got back in.
Hmm.
They kind of went through eras where it was better. Sometimes it was better than others. Other times it was almost like you'd think that the writers of the two of the different X books weren't even talking to each other. You know,
Yeah.
they would just make shit, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, "Oh crap, we're doing a crossover. We need to figure out how to
Hmm.
get everybody in the same place at the same time." But yeah,
Hmm.
right now, especially with X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, it feels like even though they're taking place in different parts of the country, there's enough where like you've seen it where like you know. Scott and Rogue will be on the phone with each other, and that scene is in both books from the different characters' perspective, like having a
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, and sort of like tying in sort of where it's leading to.
Yeah. Which I like that. I like how they're keeping that connection still. And like you don't have the whole team together. It's not just one X book, right? It's two separate, but in a way it kind of feels like they're still together because X-Men 5 or is it 5 or 6? What issue are they on right now?
Was it five that just came out? I believe.
Uncanny 5 came out this week. Last week was X-Men,
Hmm.
right? So it's like X-Men's coming out a week before Uncanny. So like one week you're reading X-Men, the next week you're gonna read Uncanny, and you'll see like either the other side of the story or like the connection, and just it's played out very well.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see where it goes forward. I'm really really stoked. But I think as soon as they announced Gail Simone was gonna be writing Uncanny, I was like, oh hell yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, of course, her being an Uncanny Experience on top of it was just like
Oh yeah.
absolute primo.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see her at New York Comic Con. Otherwise, I would have gotten like other stuff signed. But I'm glad I got the chance to meet her at Uncanny because it's smaller, right? And so
Hmm.
you have a better chance at actually having a conversation with her. And they also all or majority of them stayed at the same hotel as we did, so we got to see them. And like we even talked to Chris in the hotel lobby a bit before going up. Like it was great to be able to just like walk back with them as well. Cause like I remember walking back with Chris to the hotel. And just his little like quips and comments are just so funny to listen to.
Hmm.
It's so great.
Yeah, it's so funny how he's like an X-Men legend,
Yeah.
especially for so long. You know, in the '80s and not until the late '90s did we have the internet, and I was reading comics all the time that had Chris Claremont's name on it, and all he
Yeah.
was a name. I had no idea what he looked like, anything. Just here was this name, Chris Claremont.
Yeah.
And now it's like I've got photos of him. We were talking about this yesterday via DM. We've got photos of him like in the background. Like we were at a
Yeah.
diner in Minneapolis, and here's this little man like in the background just sipping his coffee, you know.
Now, did you take that photo on purpose, like with him in the background? Did you not know he was there?
No, I knew he was there. Like I because we saw him when we walked in, and I kept like having this debate with myself. Like, I want to go over and sit next to him and talk, but I also don't want him to be like, "I'm having my breakfast, dude. Go away." But I
Yeah.
feel like now that I know him a little bit better, he probably would have just talked my ear off for 3 hours.
Oh, probably.
Um, But no, I knew he was in the diner, but I was just attempting to get a picture of like a selfie of like all of us. And it wasn't until after I took the picture that I'm like, oh, he's in the background. Like you can like it just happened to be camera angled that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to show him next time. Just we're not like maybe like not in a stalkerish kind of way, but
I have a
but be
picture of
like
you.
and then the one that we took at Uncanny, you
Hmm.
just see his body and not his head. It's
Yeah.
just in the background.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's Chris because it's
Yeah.
the same outfit.
Yeah, and you see like a little bit of like the bald head like above like
Yeah.
the X-Men decoration that was hanging between us and yeah, that cracked me up.
Yeah. And now I'm trying to figure out, was that picture taken the same day?
They were both on Saturday because one
Okay,
was
cool.
Saturday morning and that one was Saturday night, like right before the Hellfire thing.
Okay, cool. Because I'm thinking like bro just wore the same
Yeah.
outfit.
He's like Einstein. He's just got like a closet full of red polos and he just like pulls a new one out every day and puts it on.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
literally. Oh, what a cutie he is.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I thought here's a guy who was like an absolute legend and he cracks me up. I took a couple of comics in at Uncanny for him to sign. And I had told Dylan before the first year that I'm like, the problem you're going to have is like you're going to need to have extra security on hand because if I get into a room with Chris Claremont, I'm not going to shut up and I'm not going to want to leave. And Dylan was like, "Oh no, you don't understand, Chris. He won't let you leave. Like he will talk to you, you know." And it was so funny. I have this comic book with me that was the very I told said earlier was the very first comic book that I ever read from Uncanny X-Men from 1989. And the one that I had was the original copy that I have that I brought in for him to sign because I'm like this is like a full circle thing for me. Like I got this at 9 years old. I've held on to it all of these eons, and now
Hmm.
Chris Claremont's going to sign it. And so I slid it across the table to him and he looks at it and kind of gets this warm smile on his face and he like opens it up and leans back in his chair and sits there and reads the entire thing in silence, like
Yeah,
page by page.
yeah.
And I'm in line. There's a whole line of Guy Augustini's right behind me, and he's like, "God damn it, Finch, let's go." And I'm like, "It's not me, man. Like, I can't interrupt him. He's reading my comic. You know, this is
Yeah.
like a core memory type moment." And eventually, you know, he started going on this thing about Justice League and the Man of Steel movie and how he would have written it differently, and they really screwed up Batman versus Superman, and and the
He's
Handlers.
talking about DC.
I know, yeah. Yeah, he's like, you know what they should have done? They should have just been like, no, screw this character. They should have brought this character in, and that would have given it the human element. And the handler's okay, like that's great, Mr. Claremont. We gotta move. We have a half hour and there's like 10 people outside.
Yeah,
But
so that actually happened to me at New York Comic Con last year.
mhm,
So I was upstairs. I knew I brought comics for Chris to sign, and I knew like how much I was gonna spend, right? But then I was looking through comics at this one booth and they had like Silver Age and Bronze Age comics and they were like a really good deal. And I found Uncanny 266, which is the first appearance of Gambit. I think it's 266. Um, Let me just double check, otherwise I'll look like a fake X-Men fan. Uh and then yeah, 265 was like the cameo appearance, and then 266 was yeah, okay, brain. Um, so I found that and I found it for a really great price too. And I think it was also newsstand. And I think the guy also like cut me a deal too. I bought it because I knew Chris was there. I was like, this is a perfect thing to get signed by him because he signed my first appearance of Rogue and now he's going to sign my first appearance of Gambit. But then, so prior to New York Comic Con, like a few months prior, I was on Chandler and Chris's podcast and we had gone through X Women, the one shot comic that he did with that Italian artist. Um, and we like dived into the whole thing and like read all of it and we just did like this whole like breakdown of the comic. And then at that same stand, I walked around. You know how they have like comics on display in the background of
mhm.
them? So I looked at the bottom. It was at the bottom of the stand and it was X Women. I was like, oh my God, I you can't tell me this wasn't a sign. So I was like, how much? She was like, $30. I'm like, steal. All right, I'll buy it. So I bought those two comics went downstairs to Chris and waited in line for him. Waited like, I don't know, 20 minutes, whatever. It was like five people in line. Um, go up to him. There's a line behind me, right? He sees that I have the X-Women comic, and I told him about like why I picked it up and stuff like that. And literally just sits there and goes through page by page of X-Women talking about it, commenting like what they did for this panel and the discussion he had with the artist for this one in the comic, and he was just reading it. And it's like it's a one-shot comic, so it's a bigger comic than like a usual series run that come out like every month. And then he does the same thing with Uncanny 266, and he was talking about Gambit's design, and all that. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, Chris, there's a line behind me, but I'm just gonna savor every moment of this. His handler wasn't even like worried about it at all. I'm pretty sure his handler at that point was like, you know what, this every time I say something, he's just gonna not listen, so I'm just gonna sit back.
Hmm.
And I just enjoyed my time listening to him talk about these two comics that are very important to me. So it was special. Also at Terrificon last year, which is in Connecticut, um, I was dressed as I think it was last year, yeah. I was dressed as Rogue in her 80s look. So the crop top and like the black underneath. I wore that to the con, and I was waiting in line for Chris. That was his first time at TurfCon, I think, to get signed, or that I know of. And I was just standing there talking to these people. And all of a sudden I hear, "Excuse me," and I turn around and it's Chris. I'm like, "Oh, hi." And he's like, "Can I please take a photo with you?" And I'm like, "Can." So we took a photo together, and then he took one on his phone. Then when I went up next in line to his table, I got a photo on my phone. But even then, he was like talking about my comics and stuff. I forgot which ones I brought, but I think I actually brought Avengers Annual 10 as one of them. Because that was the first time I had met Chris. Was last year. Yeah.
That's
So
yeah, my thing Jamie, my wife, got the similar experience at Uncanny because we were like getting ready. We were in the building, but the after party hadn't started yet. And Chris asked Jamie to escort Mr. Claremont to the after party. And like he's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, but I got to get a picture with you first." And it is going on to her about, Cassandra Nova and this stuff. And so yeah, she got to like walk him down the hall and up the elevator and into the after party. And I'm watching him walk away, and I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." You gotta be kidding me! For all the years decades that I've been an X-Men fan,
yeah.
and apparently all I needed to be was cute and have a bald head, and it would have worked,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, now you know for next time.
yeah,
Just like, shave your head completely, and then maybe your beard too,
yeah,
and then just wear something cute.
yeah.
and and he'll have you walk him to
Uh,
the after party.
I'll get a sequence yeah, prom dress, and just yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've thought about that every time I see a Professor X cosplayer. I get irritated because I love that idea because I would get so much mileage out of my body at a con if I could do Professor X and
Oh
just
yeah.
like bump around in a motorized wheelchair the entire weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so funny thing about Chris at Uncanny was that I actually wanted to get stuff signed by him. But so I had gone to see Guy earlier that day. I think this was Sunday because I was Rogue. I had seen him earlier that day, and I wanted to like say hi and probably like get a print, whatever. But then he was talking to someone, and then he was about to go on his lunch break. And I told him, I was like, "I'll like come back later. I know you're gonna go on your lunch break." And he like felt so bad. I was like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry." I think I'm pretty sure I called him Sugar too. Like I got real in character. I don't know. It's just Rogue's effect on me over the years. It's crazy. But I left, and then like maybe an hour or two later I came back, and I was chatting with him, and we were chatting for like 30 minutes. And I had planned after seeing Guy to go get Chris's signature on my comics. Um, but then we chatted for like 30 minutes, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to see Chris because the graduation ceremony started soon." And I'm like, well, it's okay. I've seen Chris a bunch of times. It's my time to talk to Guy, whatever. And we had a great conversation. Like, I don't regret it at all. We had a fantastic conversation about like acting because he knew I wanted to get into acting and just like stuff that I did with social media and like cosplaying, whatever. Um, and then I got like a print signed by him. I also got a drink. Someone, so one of my friends was like, "You want a drink?" I'm like, "Sure." So I had a drink and I like drank a bit. Um, while I was chatting with Guy, which made it all better because I didn't eat, and so just my mouth was just going. But I'm sure he appreciated it. But yeah, so I don't regret it at all talking with Guy for 30 minutes, but I didn't get a chance to get my comics signed by Chris that day.
Yeah. Well, and that ended up funny because at one point in time, you and I got in line for Chris, and we were there
Yeah.
like for like 20 minutes, and the line didn't move at all. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, maybe we'll do this tomorrow. And so we like went back out to move around. I don't remember how. Somehow or another, you and I got like separated, and I
Yeah.
swung back by Claremont's area, and there was only one person in line.
Yeah.
So I like scooted in real quick, got in there, and then of course, like I told the story earlier, he's talking to me forever. And by the time I'm like getting done, I turn around, there's like 10 people in line behind me, you know.
Yeah.
But Guy is amazing. He's just a
Oh, he's
fantastic human
oh my
being.
God. He like loved being there. He
Hmm.
was just so excited to be there. I knew he would take any chance to go, even if he wasn't a guest, because he's like that passionate about it. Um, but it was such a pleasure just chatting with him, and I got to see him again at New York Comic Con, because I did a whole video with the X-Men voice cast, except for Cal Dodd because his line was ridiculous, and I was like, I'm not waiting in this because I have a meetup to go to. But I eventually got like majority of them, and one of them being Ross Marquand, and I actually saw him again at Rhode Island. Um, Great person. He you could tell he just loves X-Men, and my video when I posted it, I got comments saying like, I did not know Ross Marquand voiced Xavier and all that. And I was like, yeah, he voiced I didn't know till I saw his name at the credits at the premiere. I think it was like the third episode, and I finally saw his name, which I was so shocked. And I know because we had this conversation at Rhode Island, and Alicia knows, and Justin knows because they were there with me, that Ross really wants to go to Uncanny next year. And he's trying to make it so, because I think there's like another con scheduled, and he's trying to not have conflict. And because once you sign a contract for one, that's it, you're in, you can't like get out of it. But he says he really, really wants to go next year to Uncanny. Like he'll do anything to go. Um, and I'm really hoping he does go because that'll be huge for the con, one. And two, he is such a fantastic person to talk to, and he knows all about like my acting career and like where I want to go. Um, and he literally for the question I asked the X-Men cast, I was behind the camera the whole time, right? I made the voice actor the star of the video. But Ross was like, "Well, you got to be in this video with me." I'm like, "Okay, like I'm not gonna say no to that." So okay, so that's why he's the only one where like I'm in the video with him. Um, and I actually uh got to chat with him a bit more at Rhode Island, and mentioned I had a booth and whatever. And yeah, it was really cool just like chatting with him. It's so awesome when you get to meet these uh voice actors for X-Men,
Hmm.
and they are like exactly what you imagined they would be. They're all like very down to earth and like passionate people about their work and about the X-Men especially. I didn't know Ross was like that's into X-Men um prior to our conversation. So it was just a pleasure. I hope he gets to come next year.
Hmm.
I'm really looking forward to next year's summer school.
Yeah. The first of all, I've got two stories here. Guy, fantastic. Like when I first started the FinChecks podcast, he was like my second guest, I believe. And during the podcast, I told him, I said, the crazy thing is that the original animated series it started when I was 12 years old, and I like grew up watching it, and now it's like X-Men 97 has started, and my daughter is 12 years old and she loves it. And he was like so inspired by that like after we got done with the podcast and everything, he of his own. I never asked him. I didn't know he was going to do this. He like recorded a video message for my 12-year-old daughter, like, and sent it to me, like thanking her for being a fan of the show and
Aw.
was so happy to have her in the fandom. And I mean, it was just like, I mean, just the absolute sweetest man in the world. I
Yeah.
had met him at WonderCon last year, which is how we got to know each other. But a little over a year ago at Twin Cities Con 2023, me and my wife are there. And it's Sunday and it's kind of like late in the day. And Twin Cities Con, it's a great con, but it's not a huge con. Obviously, like New York City Comic Con or, WonderCon. And Ross has a booth there. And I was like, oh my God. I
Yes.
was telling Jamie, I'm like, look, Ross is a booth. We got to go over and say hi to him. And of course, I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead. And of course, loved him, voicing in, obviously, he played, the Red Skull in Endgame and then, the voicing he did in What If. Um, at the time, he had been signed to play Professor X, but it hadn't been made public yet. And I'm wearing
Yes.
my Uncanny Experience jacket. So he's asking me and Jamie all these questions about X-Men, like, what do you think about this
Hmm.
character and that character, and blah 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 blah. And he's like, oh, that's really really cool. Yeah, I'm a big X-Men fan. Blah 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 blah. So like a month and a half later, it gets announced that he's playing Professor X, and I'm like, you son of a bitch,
Yeah.
you son of a bitch. Well,
Yeah.
he like a month after that, he saw Chandler at a red carpet thing, and he's like, oh yeah, I was just in Minneapolis, and I saw somebody wearing your jacket. So he remembered that it was like me, and Chandler was like, "Oh yeah, that was Finch." Blah 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 blah. I was really hoping he was going to come down Canyon this year, so I could literally wait in line just to go, "You son of a bitch, you knew, and you couldn't say anything."
So what's funny is that he was actually at SpaceCon in Texas when I was there. So all 3 weekends in a row, we were at the same con. I didn't know he was at SpaceCon, and I was wondering if he was there because I even looked at the guest list like I don't know a week prior or whatever, and I knew Josh Brolin was there, and I was like, oh, I wonder if Ross would be here because like he did Red Skull, um, and I even like asked one of my friends there if they knew, but he didn't know. And then Sunday at our like end of con dinner that we had with like our friend group, um, he goes to me, he says, "Oh, Ross Marquand was there. I saw his booth as we were going to like this photo op." And I was like, "You son of a bitch, son of a bitch," because I saw him at New York, right? And I wanted to like see if he was at SpaceCon so I could like say hi and whatever, you know. I'm not gonna be a stranger. And then at Rhode Island, I didn't know he was there as well because I'm just bad at looking at the guest list, I guess. And also I was a cosplay guest and that was like my relaxing con for after like so many in a row. And so Alicia stopped by my table and she said, "Yeah, we're gonna go see Ross." And I was like, "Oh, cool, I want to come with you." So I went with her and Justin. And I had mentioned that I was like, I was at SpaceCon. I didn't know you were there too. Otherwise, I would have said hi. And he did this like whole thing where he was like being dramatic, like, oh, like you didn't know I was there, and like you didn't say hi to me. Like, wow, like that's so good. And I was like, man, my friend didn't tell me till Sunday night after the fact. Otherwise, I would have been there. And he's like, wow, like I can't believe you did that to me. So I when I told him I had a booth at Rhode Island, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna try and stop by your booth. Like I'll probably stop by later or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, cool, bet." And so I walked back to my booth, and then I didn't think of this till then, but I was doing the shake my hand in character, but I was Rogue, right? And I even told Ross, I was like, "Well, be there on This was Saturday. I'll be there Sunday, like tomorrow. Just come by and I'll be Supergirl." And he's like, "No, but I want to see you as Rogue." I'm like, "Oh man, do whatever you want. I don't know." So at my booth, when I walked back, I thought, "Oh, it would have been awesome to get him to do a shake my hand in character as Rogue. I should do that with actually the whole X-Men cast." That idea. I got ideas, guys. They're coming. Um, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll like go to his booth later or whatever, or tomorrow, and I'll do it. Um, and so he didn't come to my booth, but I was like also thinking it would be insane if he came to my booth because he'd probably generate a crowd, which wouldn't be like good. Um, but he never ended up coming to my booth Saturday or Sunday. So now next time I see him, I'm gonna
Mhm.
be like, "Oh, you didn't come to my booth. Oh, so it's gonna be like that." Like I'm gonna give him that same
Yes,
energy back.
dramatic. Oh,
I'll be dramatic
oh,
as hell. Like you didn't
oh,
come to my
yes.
booth. Like, oh, I was waiting there forever.
You get those
But
acting skills on.
but he actually I got a DM from him on Instagram Sunday night or maybe Monday saying like, "Hey you, I'm sorry I didn't get to come to your booth, whatever, blah blah blah." And we had this great conversation. I was like, "Oh, it's no worries. I was like, you were busy. I was doing my own thing. It's okay." But we actually had like a great conversation after he was headed to Brazil, for a con there, and yeah, I was like, this motherfucker just like hit me up on Instagram apologizing, thinking everything's gonna be okay. No, I'm just kidding.
Which, as X-Men fans, is a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
anytime I have interactions with these people, because we're in that position, we're like the couple that I've like legitimately become friends with, and every once in a while I take a step back and I go, man, like the child X-Men fan in me is just like overjoyed because I didn't think that
Yeah.
like this is the way life would turn out, but yeah, here we are.
Yeah. I'm so happy. 3 years ago, I would have never imagined this, right? I'm
Hmm.
so happy that I have a great relationship with the majority of the X-Men cast. More newer than like older, but like still. Like
Hmm.
I didn't think any of them would be following me on Instagram, but like they do, right? Sometimes I see Lenore's story and it's like my post on there and I'm like me
What?
3 years ago, I'm like, oh, I would have been freaking out, right?
Yeah.
I still freak out a bit, but like the fact that I can have these casual conversations with these voice actors is
Hmm.
just so special because they're just regular people, right?
Hmm.
They're just like you and me, and they're just doing something that they love, and they're doing it for us, the fans, too. So it's all I could do is just like appreciate that and just, keep following their work.
Yeah, absolutely. We are at the clock. We're at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Whew.
we
We've
breezed
been
through that like
chittering and chattering.
a little bit. Um, Everybody, Stefania Sassano, if you're not already following her on all socials, go do it. Like, you're just dumb if you're not. But no argument there. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for doing this. This is always fun.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure we have plenty more interaction social media wise going forward. I have no doubt.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we're gonna get out of here, folks, and we will see you all next time.
Bye.